So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this evening's um, summer pre-orientation session, making sense of the financial aid package as we plan ahead. This is a series of webinars that we have prepared for you in order to get you prepped for orientation in the next few weeks. That way, when you do come to campus, you are better equipped to ask questions and have a better sense of how things will go. So, with that said, my name is Eva Reyes. I'm the Director of Parent and Family Relations. If you've been to one of our sessions before, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, we're glad that you're here and we hope that you learned quite a few things tonight. So, I just want to go over a few ground rules with you. So, everyone is on mute. That way we could get through the material. You're able to listen and get everything as we go through the session. The recording is in progress. That way, if there's anything that maybe you couldn't quite understand or you need to go back to, the recording is going to be available for you to do that. Closed captioning is available for those that need it. All you need to do is just hit the more options button on your taskbar on the Zoom and just select the closed caption and turn it on. If you could please put your questions as we go along in the chat. I will try to answer as much as I'm able to answer based on my knowledge. But if anything, we're going to have to wait to answer the questions live and Stacy will be able to do that once she does the formal presentation. And please provide us your feedback. There's going to be a QR code at the end of the session, the formal presentation. If you could please scan it, or when I send you an email at the end of the week, there's going to be a link on there. If you could please give me your feedback and let me know what you thought. If there's like any other sessions that you would like for us to have throughout the year as we wrap up these like series this summer, but we could definitely have some during the year. I'll be happy to incorporate any of the sessions that you think you may enjoy. So then with that, we're just gonna get right into it because we have quite a little bit to go through. So Stacy, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy Ann Brown, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here at William Patterson. And I'll just be covering a few important topics of financial aid. I'll talk a little bit about some of what is in the news with federal student loans and just planning for this year, but also thinking ahead. I was just gonna get the PowerPoint ready for us, and I will go through a couple slides.
Give me 1 second. Are you able to see?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we can, and that's me, just did my intro. So some of the topics we'll talk a bit about today is applying for financial aid. That'll be a general overview. I think at this point, for the most part, most families have kind of started the financial aid process and got ahead on that. Go through the financial aid offer, types and sources of financial aid, some additional things that may be out there for students. Evan Senior teams might be out there for students, student loan programs, federal and state verification, talk a little bit about special circumstances, satisfactory academic progress. Then we have some announcements and reminders for future sessions, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So we'll move into the presentation now to the first slide. Applying for financial aid. So at this point in time, it's June 15. Most of you, hopefully, have already completed the FAFSA application. So the FAFSA application is a federal application for student aid, and that is the first step in the college financial aid process. The application opens annually October 1st. So if you've already submitted that for your student for fall 2026, that's great, but you will have to complete that application annually so that the student's eligibility can be determined for the upcoming fall 2027, 2028, and 2029 academic years. For New Jersey Dreamers, they would need to complete the New Jersey alternate application for state aid eligibility consideration. For the New Jersey state, the FAFSA needs to be completed by April 15th every year. So, for example, talking about a timeline. So for fall 2027, right? You've already done everything for fall 2026. If you're looking forward to doing things for fall 2027, October 1st, 2026 is when the FAFSA will open. So once it opens, you can go in and complete that. April 15th, 2027 is when that FAFSA needs to be received by the state. So you do have a 4-month period or 6 months, October to April, thereabout, to get the FAFSA completed to meet that state aid deadline. So it opens October 1st, but must be done by April 15th. So think of it in that terms annually. The FAFSA application is not required for students who are receiving merit aid only, so honors scholarship, a trustee, depending on the student's admissions application. It's not required to receive those scholarships, so if parents or families are not interested or believe that they won't be eligible for federal and state grants, and they decide they do not want to pursue the FAFSA, that's totally fine. It's not required if the student is scholarship or merit aid only, but we do need to consider that some other forms of institutional and external scholarships may require the FAFSA. So that's just something to keep in mind. A little bit about financial aid programs. They do consist of scholarships, grants, loans, and work study, right? I know loans tend not to be considered financial aid. When we're talking to a lot of families, a lot of families will say, we didn't receive any aid. In the scope of financial aid, loans are aid, right? Because aid is funding used to assist or help to reduce a student's overall costs. So it is included in that. So sometimes when we say a student did receive financial aid, it could be one of all or a combination of those 4 things. Next slide. So the financial aid offer, if you've completed your FAFSA, we received that, you would have gotten a financial aid offer that outlines the estimated tuition and fees, some of the grants and scholarships that the student would have been eligible for, and then the net costs. So looking at both of these, I just kind of pulled out the most pertinent part of that aid offer, which is the cost to attend, how much free money the student receives. So that's money that does not have to be paid back. And then the resulting net cost. So for what it will cost a student to attend, that will differ based on whether a student is planning to live on campus, so in a dorm and have a meal plan, versus a student that's planning to commute. So a student that's planning to live at home with the family would have a cost to attend or a direct cost that only lists tuition and fees, because those are the things that they would actually receive a bill for, right? So if they're not living in the dorms, their bill would only have tuition and course-related fees, right? So that's what this outlines. Then we subtract any grants or scholarships they may have received for the academic year, and that gives you your direct net cost. So it's basically the cost to attend, which is what the university would bill you, and then subtract your grants and scholarships, and that's your direct net cost, or your out-of-pocket cost, so to speak. What other expenses should I budget for? Those are components of what's called the cost of attendance. So the cost of attendance takes into account, or would like to give family a general overview of additional costs that they should expect or might incur in the normal enrollment for that student, right? So while we are not going to bill the student for housing and food, we have to give them an allowance for that. So for example, if you would like to, a student's going to be commuting back and forth, right? You may have to budget in that, okay, you're going to have to give them maybe $150 a week or $200 a week so they can eat on campus or buy food to kind of support while they're in their courses. Books and supplies, you want to budget for that. So we give an allowance for that. in that cost of attendance, just so you can budget out the additional things that you might be incurring out of pocket that you won't see on a billing statement, or you won't be paying directly to William Patterson. But you would need to purchase books, transportation, you might need to get a bus pass, or think about the cost of gas if they're going back and forth from school to home. So that's kind of the general overview. It's giving a full picture of what the total cost, what it would totally cost you for the student to attend, other than just what you would see on that bill. So it's really there for planning purposes. On the right-hand side, you have a cost of attendance or cost to attend for a student that would be living on campus, right? So that just includes now estimated costs for housing, which would be a dorm, and food, which would be their specific meal plan. So that just gives you two variations of what you would see. If your plans were to live on campus, you would have received an aid offer that looked like that snapshot on the right, which would include housing and food in that direct net cost, or what you would see on the bill. And then if they were planning to live on campus, live at home with parents, you'd have seen something in direct net cost with just tuition and fees. It's really just to get you to plan to budget. Next slide. So we'll talk about types of financial aid. So we talked a bit about that gift aid, right? So grants and scholarships, and gift aid is aid that does not have to be repaid back. They could come from sources such as the federal government, the state government. So that typically is a result of submitting the FAFSA application. Scholarships could be institutional scholarships, those scholarships that the student was granted upon admission based on their merit or academic performance in high school. It could be external scholarships that the student and or parent sources themselves. So it could be other organizations, such as a church or local club that the student may have participated in. So it just depends on the different scholarship applications, or how many additional things we're doing outside of the college admissions process. There is self-help aid, which we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Loans are financial aid, so we call them that self-help because that is money that you would have to pay back. And then student employment, which is called federal work study, is where a student can work part-time and earn money similar to having a job off campus, but the funding for that money comes from the federal government. Next slide. What's out there for students? We talked a little bit about the types of aid program. So the federal Pell Grant, the SCOG, the Teach Grant, and the Tuition Aid Grant are all federal and state grants that a student can become eligible for by submitting the FAFSA application. So all of these grants require first a submission or a valid submission of the FAFSA application. And once they submit that FAFSA application based on the Student Aid Index, which is a qualifier that the federal government kind of calculates as a result of inputted families, household, and income information, the student may be eligible for one of or a combination of these grants, or in certain circumstances not be qualified at all. So, but the FAFSA application would be that first step in determining if a student is eligible for any of these aid programs. It's based on the Student Aid Index, as I mentioned earlier, which is the SAI. It's automatic with eligibility, so there's nothing the student needs to do to claim those funds. They don't need to accept them. They don't need to do any additional steps. If the student submits a FAFSA and they are eligible based on that index, the institution will award that scholarship. The maximum for that award for the upcoming year is $73.95 for the academic year, which means that amount is split in half for each term. And also that is the amount if a student is full-time. So another point is everything you see on the financial aid offer is based on a student being enrolled full-time, which for an undergraduate student is 12 credits, right? So we want to think of maximizing the funds that a student receives. We have to be enrolled full-time each term. And if a student wants to graduate in 4 years, which is the standard program, they would need to be 15 credits per semester, right? So typical 4-year degree is 120 credits. So you break that down to 4 years, 30 credits per year, 120 credits in 4 years, right? So 12 credits is the minimum to be full-time, but 15 credits is the standards to graduate in 4. So always think in terms of the aid presented is based on if a student is enrolled full-time for the academic year. SEOG is another grant program for the neediest of students based on availability, and it does have limited funding. The Teach Grant is a grant for students in specific teaching areas who agree to teach in high need fields once they complete their program. It is a program that is not automatically awarded. It is a program that a student has to kind of seek out and complete the requirements online. And then we have a counseling session to make sure they understand just what those program requirements are. Because while it is a grant, if a student does not complete all those requirements and does exactly what is necessary to certify their employment, that grant could become a loan. So it's something that we counsel students on deeply to make sure they understand the commitment. The tuition aid grant is the state's version of the Pell Grant. So the federal Pell Grant's from the federal government. The tuition aid grant is from the state of New Jersey for New Jersey residents who submit their FAFSA. Eligibility, again, is automatic. Once they submit the FAFSA application, the state reviews that application and based on their eligibility index, deems the student eligible or ineligible. The student is eligible, then they receive the award. There is no additional necessary steps for them to do. We'll talk a little bit more on verification in a bit. Students must be enrolled full-time. So this specific program, a student must be enrolled full-time in order to get any portion of the award. So if a student is awarded a maximum TAG grant, which for this year is $9,496, they have to be full-time each semester in order to receive any portion of that. So it's very important that, again, to maximize aid eligibility, student needs to be full-time, right? The idea is you're full-time, you're progressing more quickly to graduation, and you're completing your program within the time period that allows for them not to start running out of certain funding, right? So, for example, for the Pell Grant, you can get up to 6 years of payments, right? So if a student is taking a little bit longer to graduate, it does give 2 additional years of funding. For the state grant, it gives 1 semester of additional funding. So it gets a little bit strict as we go down. So you want to make sure that they're maximizing that and progressing on track to graduate within the time periods of allowable. Next slide. What's out there for students? So going a little bit more into scholarships. So William Paterson has the WP Pledge for Success and the Garden State Guarantee Program. The WP Pledge for Success is for students in their first and second year. So when they start in that first semester, for students with families with an adjusted gross income between 0 and 65,000, the program will pay the difference in any grants and scholarships up to tuition and fees. So it just guarantees that the student can attend tuition free, barring they're not living on campus, right? What do I mean by that? So if a family has an adjusted gross income of 60,000, right? That would put the student into the eligibility to qualify for this grant. If they have tuition and fees is $17,000 for the year, just using a round number, for example, and they received between their TAG grant and their Pell Grant, they received $15,000. William Paterson will pay the other $2,000 to make sure that their full tuition and fees is covered. So it pays the gap up to tuition and mandatory fees that other grants and scholarships do not cover. Again, requires a student to be full-time. Automatic eligibility. There's nothing the student needs to do to qualify for the award. We look at the student's FAFSA application, once again, to determine the family's adjusted gross income. And if eligible, that is applied to their account if they have a gap or they have a balance left over after their grants and scholarships. The Garden State Guarantee Program is the state's version of that. So they cover the 3rd and 4th year. So William Paterson covers the student in their 1st and 2nd year, 0 to 60 credits. And then the state of New Jersey, for New Jersey state residents, this is a New Jersey state resident program, will cover the 3rd and 4th year, same exact rules. So a student that meets that adjusted gross income criteria could potentially go to school for free, meaning that the tuition and mandatory fees are covered for all 4 years. What it does not cover is, so you will see a student that might qualify for this program, they would still have a balance if they lived on campus, right? Because that is not something that the grant covers. So families would still have that additional cost of covering housing and food if they were receiving the Pledge for Success or Garden State Guarantee, because that program only covers tuition and mandatory fees. Institutional scholarships are scholarships that are based on academic merit. So students would have already received that with their admissions packet based on their GPA. Scholarships ranging from $1,000 to $10,000 annually. They're typically renewable for up to 4 years or 8 semesters. And again, these also require students to maintain full-time enrollment. So that I spoke about earlier is these scholarships run out after 4 years, right? So we want to make sure we're maximizing the enrollment and maximizing our pace to completion so that we're not looking at a situation which, and we know there are outlying factors, right? But we're not looking at a situation which, okay, you've gotten to 4 years, you still have 2 semesters left to complete before you finish your program. And now you've run out of this funding, so now the family has to plan for additional costs that were covered in those first 4 years. So it's thinking about maximizing the funding, what's available to you, how long it's going to last, and then looking at how to get that student finished in that time period. Work study is federal funds that allows a student to work on campus for 15 to 20 hours per week. Academics come first, so it's built around a student's schedule, and it's based on availability, limited funding. Students just complete a online workshop, which is available on our webpage. And then from there, we receive the students' interest in work study, and then we communicate with them once we receive the webinar submissions. Next slide. Federal loans for students. So here's where I give my first spiel in that loans are last resort, right? And when I say that, I mean only use loans if they are absolutely needed, right? So for students in general, once they submit the FAFSA application, that is their application to student loans, right? There's no additional step. They don't need to do another thing to receive their student loan eligibility. A student in their first year, so if the student is starting as a freshman in the fall, they would be eligible for $5,500 for the academic year. $5,500 is what they receive at William Patterson and any other institution in the nation. That's the federal borrowing limit for a first-year dependent student, meaning parent information is required on the FAFSA, right? For independent students who are typically not our first-year students, they would qualify for $9,500 for the year. So when we look at loan funding, we think of loan funding in terms of you maximize your grant and scholarship eligibility. You're looking at work study or any other supplements available. And then if absolutely necessary, then we're tapping into loans, right? And when we look at the loans or the different types of loans, you have subsidized loan and unsubsidized loan. So subsidized loans are loans that the federal government pays the interest on while students are enrolled in their undergraduate program in 6 months post program completion or when they stop being enrolled. So you want to use, if offered, because not all families are eligible for the subsidized loan. If subsidized loan is included in the student's aid offer, and you need to use a portion of loan funding, you would utilize any portion of the subsidized loan first, because that is a loan that is not accruing interest while the student is in school, right? So you're using the subsidized portion first, if it is available to you. And then if you need to use the full amount of the subsidized loan, then you would then start using the unsubsidized loan. For example, if you need, after all the grants and scholarships, you need $4,000 to cover the student's balance for the academic year. Each first-year student is offered up to $3,500 in a subsidized loan. You would use that $3,500 first, and then use $500 of the $2,000 that you're offered for the unsubsidized loan. So you want to use you're kind of tearing down to, if you have to use the loans, start with the subsidized if it's available to you, and then tap into the unsubsidized, because that is accruing interest at the annual interest rate until the student graduates and beyond until it is repaid. Students are required to be enrolled half-time. So here, we're not going to be enrolled half-time, right? We're going to be enrolled full-time so we can be done and complete with the program. But if a student, for any reason, cannot be enrolled full-time for a semester, we understand that situations happen, then they must be a minimum of 6 credits in order to utilize any portion of the federal loans offered to them. they're not a minimum of 6 credits or half time, then they cannot utilize any of those funds. Beginning this year, loans will be prorated for students that are enrolled less than full time. So again, that's why we're kind of pushing the idea that if at all possible, it is necessary for a student to be full time to be able to maximize their eligibility and use all the funding that's available to them to successfully complete their program. Students that are enrolled less than full time will have a tiered or reduced amount in their loan funds based on their enrollment. So it's important that while a student might be offered $5,500 for the academic year, if they're not full-time, those amounts will start to tear down and be prorated by loan type. So then it just becomes a different calculation altogether. There's no separate loan application. I mentioned that. And then the interest rate for the loans borrowed this year is 6.52%. So the subsidized loan will be 6.52%. Start accruing interest 6.52% once the student graduates. The unsubsidized portion of that, if accepted, will start accruing interest at 6.52% once it's dispersed, first dispersed in October. Interest rates do change every year, so this is a fixed rate for the amount borrowed this year. So loans borrowed this year will have a 6.52%. Each year, the federal government decides the interest rate that will be attached to student loans. And so it might be lower or higher next year for loans borrowed for future. So that's also something to consider. The fixed rate is only attached to loans. This fixed rate is only attached to loans or federal student loans borrowed in this specific academic year. There is a lifetime limit on student loans to consider. Just go back really quickly. Yep, there's a lifetime limit for a dependent student is $31,000 is what they can borrow for their undergraduate degree program. And for independent students or parents, students who do not require parent information on their FAFSA, that amount is $57,000. So also something to keep into consideration. All right, next slide. Federal loans for parents. So if for any reason, typically in circumstances where either a family does not qualify for grants and scholarships, or we need to subsidize the students' aid because they're living on campus and just the costs are a little bit higher, and so grants and scholarships do not cover, right? There are loans available to parents, or federal loans that are available to parents. The student must, again, be enrolled at least half-time in order for these to be utilized. The parent will be the applicant and the responsible party for repayment. So this is a loan that the parent will apply for in their name and will be required to repay once the student completes that program. The annual borrowing limit, which is a new change beginning in fall 2026 with new students, is a parent can borrow a maximum of $20,000 per year in the federal Parent Plus loan. Not that it will be necessary, but that's the absolute maximum that you can borrow per student, not per parent. So for example, if you have a circumstance where the one parent, parents are splitting responsibility. One parent can apply for $10,000 and the other parent can apply for $10,000. But it's the maximum of all federal Parent Plus loans for an academic year cannot exceed $20,000 per student. And for the lifetime of that student's program, the parent or parents can only borrow up to $65,000 for that student. Now, if you're looking at this like me, you're saying, if the annual limit is $20,000, why is the lifetime limit $65,000, right? If we're thinking about typically a bachelor's program is 4 years, right? So that's also something now that we need to consider. Over the lifetime of the program, you can only borrow $65,000. So another consideration is to maybe split $65,000 evenly. So you can plan evenly across the board to borrow I think that's 16,000 something, rather than borrowing the 20,000 for the first 3 years and then the last year being left with 5,000. And then you're kind of scrambling or kind of trying to figure out how to subsidize that additional amount, right? The other consideration is if you need more than $20,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the other slide. But these loans, the interest rates for them is 9.07%. That is fairly high. To what you might see or based on creditworthiness might see on the private loan side. So that's also something to take into consideration is that the interest rate, regardless of your credit worthiness, is 9.07%. No lower, no higher. For every approved borrower, that will be the interest rate for the Parent Plus loans that are awarded for this academic year. Again, if you apply for another loan next year, the interest rate, depending on the federal government, might be lower or higher. But that's only, that 9.07% only applies to loans that are borrowed this specific academic year. So for fall 26 through to summer 2027. Next slide. Additional loan options. So you're considering two different options here when it comes to loans. So there's the Parent Plus loan, which we just discussed, and then there are private student loans or private educational loans that are sourced or funded through, you might see a Sallie Mae, your local credit union might offer one, PNC, just different lenders that are out there. And so there's a consideration to be made with which option kind of works best for you. And you're putting side by side depending on your family circumstances and what works for your family long term. So when we look at the kind of measuring them together, pros and cons, is the interest type and the interest rate, right? So the Parent Plus loan interest rate is fixed at 9.07%. That's not going to fluctuate, right? Again, it's for the loan that you borrowed for that specific application. On the private loan side, they can be fixed or variable. So it just depends on the type of loan that you apply for and the different lender that you select. They could be as low as 2.5%, which if you're measuring that beside a 9.07, it's a better deal, right? In terms of interest rate, but they do go as high as 17.99%. So, and you're not, you won't know what the interest is until you apply. The specific interest is. So that is also something that you consider or compare between the two. Origination fees, the Parent Plus loans and all federal loans do have origination fees, which is a fee that the Department of Education charges for the loan origination. For the student loans or the loans that the student borrows, it's a fairly negligible amount. For the Parent Plus loans, depending on how much you borrow, it could be a couple $100s, right? So you borrow 20,000, but you're really only getting 19,250 per se. So that's also something to consider, that what you borrow is the gross, but what you actually pay to the student account is net this origination fee. So something else to consider. Most private loans do not have origination fees. So that will be something else to kind of throw in there to consider when you're comparing. Loan repayment terms. With the new changes now to student loan programs, Parent Plus loans only have the 10 to 25 year tier standard plus repayment plan available, right? And so that tiered plan will be based on income, adjusted gross income of the family, and based on different discretionary loan criteria. It's a slight deviation or a large deviation from what's available prior to fall 2026. The private loans typically offer repayment plans 5 to 20 years. So it's something to consider when looking at repayment terms, and of course, how much your borrowing might kind of affect how far we stretch that repayment term out. Borrowing limits. So with the Parent Plus loan, we talked a little bit about that, $65,000 for the lifetime. With private loans, you can borrow as much as up to the student's cost of attendance, and as much as you, as often as or as much as the application is needed. So there's no real cap or ceiling in that way, in that the only cap is the maximum cost of attendance that a student has at the institution, and barring that, you get approved for the loans continually as you need them. Credit requirements, the Parent Plus loan has less strict credit requirements than private lenders do. Typically, the only kind of things that bar a parent from being approved for a Parent Plus loan are derogatory marks, and more recent derogatory marks like bankruptcy and foreclosure. But typically, parents tend to get approved at far higher rates than they would for a private loan if they have some adverse credit history. For private loans, typical minimum are in the mid 600s. So just something else to consider there. Another thing we didn't mention a little bit earlier that I skipped is for the Parent Plus loan. So for a parent who, let's say, you have some financial circumstances going on, and you're not going to be approved for a private loan. And let's say by chance you're not approved for a Parent Plus loan either, right? So with the Parent Plus loan, if a parent applies for a Parent Plus loan and gets denied for any reason, it does grant the student additional loan funds, $4,000 in their first and second year, in their first year, and $5,000 in their first and second year, sorry, and then $5,000 additional loans in their third and fourth year. So for example, for a student starting in the fall, their first year student, their standard loan amount is $5,500 that they would get from the FAFSA. If that parent applies for the Parent Plus loan and gets denied, they get an additional $4,000 to utilize for the year. So that goes up to $9,500 that they can borrow in federal loans. So the Parent Plus loan does have or does offer some assistance to parents with adverse credit history to kind of help bridge that gap in loan funds that they know that the parent cannot receive on their own. Degree types. The Parent Plus loan is only available for students pursuing an undergraduate degree, so bachelor's degree programs or private loans. Student can apply at any enrollment level. I mean, international student, a non-degree student, certificate student, doesn't really matter on the program. Option to co-sign with the student. So the Parent Plus loan does not have co-sign options. So the parent will be the borrower, the sole borrower, and the sole required repayee. For the private loans, a student can co-sign with the parent. And typically, students need a co-signer if they're going to be the applicant because they don't have credit history, they don't have enough income to support loan borrowing. So typically, parents are applying and having students as co-signers or vice versa to offset the credit and income requirements. Next slide. Federal and state verification. So we've talked a little bit about the FAFSA, resulting aid from those programs, and understanding the different aid programs that you will see. Another thing that may happen as a result of submitting the FAFSA is that a student may be requesting, we might request additional information to verify the information on the FAFSA as required by the Department of Education. So the federal and state federal verification, William Patterson will request information from the student. So it could be household information verification, parent tax returns, student tax returns as the student worked, verifying identity. We also verify if the federal government requires a student's citizenship status. So a lot of times when students change citizenship status, so if they go from being a permanent resident to a U.S. citizen, the Social Security Administration does not communicate with USCIS. They do not transfer that information over. So typically those students tend to get flagged that they cannot verify their citizenship status because those offices don't speak to each other. So we have to request kind of documentation of a student's US passport or their certificate of US citizenship to verify that status and kind of clear their account to move forward. So those are the kind of things you'll see on the federal side. Additionally, the state of New Jersey also reserves the right to verify FAFSA information. That is unfortunately a separate process. So for state verification, students would receive emails from New Jersey Grants and Scholarships Office, HESA.org. That additional information is required. And then that is where students would go to upload information and submit to request from the state of New Jersey. We do also notify students that the state is requesting information. We text them, we email them, same thing for the federal federal verification as well. But we are on top of students with that, and we make sure we notify them that, hey, the state is requesting something, you need to submit to this, or that $9,400 could go away, right? So it's very important on both sides. If additional information is required, that students respond to that immediately, and that parents support the submission of that information because they could be missing out on aid opportunities to help cover their costs. Next slide. Special circumstances. So you submitted the FAFSA. The FAFSA is asking right now for 2024 tax information. It's 2 years later. It doesn't reflect kind of the circumstances that's happening right now in the household. What do you do? Right? So as aid administrators in the federal government, we know that there's a 2-year gap between what is reported and what is currently happening. And so the special circumstances process allows for families to kind of sit down with a financial aid counselor, discuss what's going on, what popular or common situations that we see is a parent is now permanently disabled, they're on a fixed income, so the income might look very different than 2024. Retirement, divorce of a parent or spouse, loss of employment, unusual uncovered medical dental expenses, the unfortunate death of a parent or a spouse. And so we do have a process for reviewing that with the parent, going through the circumstances, seeing if these changes will make a material difference to the student's aid profile and whether they would be eligible for additional aid programs. And additional aid could be anything from initially you didn't qualify for a subsidized loan, and this change is going to make you subsidized loan eligible. While it is a loan that is interest-free versus what the student may have been receiving prior to. And so that is a benefit, right? That could be a benefit from this process. A benefit could be that they get additional grant eligibility, federal and state. And a benefit could be that while they may not get additional aid or it's not changing anything much from their profile, it might put them into that realm for the Pledge for Success or the Garden State Guarantee, right? To make them tuition free. So there's different considerations that we make, but we do initially start out by reaching out to our office. Every student is assigned a financial aid counselor to speak with their counselor and kind of see what is required. There is a form that is required to be completed by the student and the parent, and then submit all the supporting documentation based on the circumstances. We review that and respond with a decision as to what the outcome is to that process. Next slide. And we'll round up with talking a little bit about satisfactory academic progress, right? So we know that the intent for our students, we want them to be successful. We want them to be able to go to their classes and succeed in the things that they make out to do. But we have to always keep in mind that there are guidelines that student has to maintain in order to retain their eligibility for federal and state aid, right? And how I like to consider this is that the federal and state government is saying that they're making an investment, or this is an investment into the student's future. And so in order to make sure that they're progressing at the minimum standard to complete that degree successfully, they have to maintain these standards. And the standard is maintaining a 2.0. So that's a cumulative 2.0 GPA. They maintain that GPA in the academic year. That is the university's minimum GPA requirement as well. So that's the minimum standard allowable, and that they earn at least 67% of the credits they attempt to take, right? So if a student attempts 10 credits, so they register for 10 credits for the semester, they need to pass at least 7 of those credits, right? To make sure that they're above or equal to that 60%, 67% requirement. So it's making sure that they're enrolling classes, they're remaining enrolled, and they're successful. Now, anything can happen, right? Student might have a family circumstance that happens. They might be struggling with a class, so on and so forth. And so there is a process if a student have had kind of a struggling semester or something happened that caused them not to be successful. A student does have the opportunity to appeal and submit to an online appeal, kind of detailing what the circumstances are. It's important that when they detail that circumstance, they have any supporting documentation. Could be statements from persons, it could be notes from families, it could be his documentation. If they say they were in an accident and they had a terrible semester, they had to rehab, maybe submitting a police report or anything supporting that would support that statement to say that this is what's happened, it's an unusual circumstance, and this is how I plan to kind of get back on track. These appeals are reviewed by a committee. Students are approved, then they are given probation requirements to maintain their aid eligibility. They can go forward and complete their aid, complete their education successfully. If students are denied the appeal for any reason, then they would have to self-fund. So families would have to pay out of pocket. So they would lose the eligibility for federal and state aid programs, including loans, until they meet the standards on their own, right? So it's a very important part of their college career, in that keep in mind that it's not just attending, it's not just going to class blindly, but also making sure that you're getting the support you need, right? So reach out to financial aid if there's an issue and students are having kind of problems maintaining their course schedule, reaching out to their academic advisors and talking to persons who are in those areas to assist, and making sure that we're keeping on track to successfully complete, because you're making the biggest investment of it all, right? You've invested all these years in time, all these years in love, and kind of keeping them on track. And so we want to make sure that we're making the best of your investment more than all, and that students are successful when they come to William Patterson, that we help them with that. And we'll go to the next slide. Tips and takeaways, right? So first and most important is that we keep on track with important deadlines and dates to maximize eligibility. Again, the FAFSA application opens October 1st. So put it on your calendars. October 1st, October 15th. I'll even give you through Christmas break. They come home, you're both together, you can sit down and do it together. Over Christmas break is typically what I say winter break, because we can have a little bit downtime and come sit down and submit that FAFSA application, but put it on your calendar. This needs to be done annually. Start with grants and scholarships as resources, right? So make sure you're maximizing those opportunities for grants and scholarships by doing the applications early. In the spring semester, first year students aren't eligible, but as a sophomore student, when they're going into their sophomore or second year, they will have available to them a donor scholarships application. We notify the entire campus population. I believe it opens like March 1st. It's open for 30 days. It opens March 1st and closes the end of March. So we notify the campus community, go and complete the donor scholarships application. It's one application and students could qualify for hundreds of scholarships to help them as they progress to their sophomore year. In their junior year, the application opens again for that year. So it's a once a year application again. Put that on the calendar around March 1st. Hey, did you do the donor scholarships application? Is that application open? You need to make sure you do that. You could get an extra 1,000, an extra 2,000, an extra 3,000, right? To help cut those costs down. Check their emails, right? Make sure students specifically, you can't check their emails, but kind of, give them nudges to say, hey, make sure you're checking your emails. Are you making sure that everything is submitted? Is there anything being requested? Are you on top of it? Because we know that once the semester starts, they get kind of boggled with everything on the academic side, understandably, but it's also important to make sure that they're checking in, even if they set a time once a week on Saturdays. Let me take a look at my email. Let me see if anything happens, right? To make sure that they're not missing any important information. We're also going to text, right? So we're sending it to their phones. We're also going to call, make drop-ins. So we'll do a number of different things, but just putting a timeline to kind of check in to make sure these things are getting done. Loan borrowing only when necessary and only what you need. Because again, as I said, federal loans, the interest rates are pretty high. So only utilize what you need and borrow only when absolutely necessary. Maintaining SAP standards or SAP standards are very important. 2.0, 67%, or 2.0 and 2/3, right? So maintain that cumulative, and at least 2/3 of the courses that you enroll for you need to pass them. You need to earn those credits so that you can progress successfully and you're not looking at losing that financial eligibility, which can be devastating for a family, right? And most importantly, if you're not sure, you don't know what's going on, contact financial aid. So reach out to us. Reach out. The students do have an academic advisor. You can move on to the next slide. Students do have an academic advisor as well as a assigned financial aid advisor that is available to them. This is what it will look like in their WP Connect portal. So it's a financial aid counselor that will be linked to their counselor's email. And then navigate for students, they can schedule an appointment directly with that financial aid counselor. So that is listed for them. Reach out. If you as a parent, you're not sure, email us directly at finaid@wpunj.edu. And we can get kind of everything sorted and help students be successful. Next slide. I think that might be it. Maybe the wrap up announcements for everyone.
So yeah, so
Thank you, everyone.
before we end with the with the formal presentation and get to some questions that are in the chat and open up the floor for other questions. I just have a few announcements and reminders, which if you were here last week, they're probably just the same. So we are observing summer hours through August 14th. This week we are open Monday through Thursday, but because we're observing the Juneteenth holiday on Friday, our office are open between 8:30 and 4:30 p.m. So if there's any university business that you need to do anytime this week, we revert back to our regular schedule. So from 8:30 to 4:30, and that's going to happen again that week of Friday, July 3rd, because we observe 4th of July that Friday. So then next week we'll observe the summer schedule again, 8 a.m. to 5:15. It gets confusing. If it's confusing for you, it's very confusing for us. And for us that's been working here for quite a long time, every year it doesn't get any easier, but we deal with it. So I'm still looking for interesting stories for our Pioneer Family Corner. We already have one set for July. I want to feature a few more during the month of July and August. So if you want to share your family story and how excited you are for your student to start their journey at William Patterson, please scan the QR code or click on the link once I send the final email with all of the sessions by the end of the week. And then let us know who you are. We want to know about you. We want to get to know you. And we want the whole university community to know you as well. So we only have 2 more sessions left, our pre-orientation sessions. One is tomorrow, getting to know the Trill Student Support Services. This is a great session for any first generation families, maybe students that have disabilities. And they will talk about how they support these students in order to ensure that they are successful at William Patterson, not just academically, but personally and socially. And then June 17th, it's the second part of like this whole financial funding, education type of thing. Is going to be college costs explained, budgeting, billing, and beyond. So during this session, we're going to fill in some of the blanks, right? Like what if you took out what if your student was eligible for all this aid, but it just wasn't enough? How are you able to fund the difference? So we're going to talk about that during that session. We're also going to talk about when bills are going to be due and how it translates into everything else. So join us for that session, and you can sign up on the portal or on the email that I sent out last week. There was a link on there. So after this week, I don't get to see you anymore for a couple of weeks because we're gonna be full blown in orientation mode. So our first session, July 16th, everyone is welcome. It is an EOF and honors session because they have separate sessions for those students. But if you're a first year family, you're more than welcome to attend with your student. July 28th and July 30th, I keep the August 6th date here for transfer student orientation. That way, you know when they all are. So the invitations already went out. They went out both in email and they went out as a paper mailer as well. So your student should go onto the orientation site and sign up for their preferred date. I suggest the sooner that they sign up for the date, the better, because as graduations are over and things like that, you're probably planning your summer vacation. So you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to attend one of the orientation sessions so that it doesn't fall within vacation. Both students and their families are invited. There's 2 separate tracks, one for students and one for families, and you'll be able to meet the university staff, faculty, and be able to talk to us on a more personal level. And it's just like a fun day. So we thoroughly invite you and encourage you to attend with your student. And that's it for the formal presentation. Like I said earlier, if you joined us from the beginning, your feedback is what makes this program thrive. So let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. what you would like to see in the future, and I'll make sure to bring those programs to you. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. And Stacy, there's quite a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to take it
I'll go through
from,
them.
yeah.
So the first question is, students who will be living on campus, do they require transportation? So they do not. So transportation for a student living on campus is included in that portion of the cost of attendance that are just costs that you may need to budget for. It's a smaller number for on-campus students because you may be thinking about budgeting for, okay, if they need to come home on weekends, right? Or if they need to if they need transportation at any other point during that time, that's a cost you would budget for. But they do not require transportation to like get to class or anything like that. The transportation aspect of that would be to commute to and from home, however often they're going to do that, or if they have they need to get off campus and go anywhere else between being enrolled, would just be to plan for that specific cost, but it is not required in that sense.
Can I just say something? However, if your student is going to be driving to campus or is going to be having a car on campus, their car needs to be registered with the university police. So if they go onto WP Connect, they can register their car through there. That way, if their campus police knows that that car is supposed to be on campus, and they should be parking in the designated student areas. If they park in any other area, they are risking getting ticketed or towed. So that's why it's very, very important to for them to be able to register that car.
Thanks, Eva. The next question is by Phil. Hi, Phil. And the question is, our family circumstances have changed since 2024, the year the FAFSA is based on. What is the deadline for submitting an appeal to get additional aid? So there is no formal deadline. It's a rolling deadline, meaning you could apply or could submit the form for that right now. You could submit the form in October. You could submit the form in January of 2027. So as long as the student is it's prior to them being enrolled, so that leading into the academic year and before the academic year ends, we can still review that specific circumstance. So it's not a hard deadline, it's a rolling deadline. But what I will say is the sooner you submit that, right, the sooner you would have a better outlook on what's available to you and be able to plan better going into the semester. So if you want to know their aid eligibility with these changes, before the bills come out in July, before they're due, before the semester starts, right? For better planning, then you would submit that as soon as possible, or as soon as you're able to. But there's not a hard deadline. If you don't do it before July 1st, you're not kind of out of the whack for that. You'll still have time. The next question is, when can a student apply for the WP Pledge of Success and Garden State Guarantee? So that part of the question is they do not need to apply. As long as we've received the FAFSA or the New Jersey alternate application, if a student is eligible, if they meet the family meets the adjusted gross income criteria, it is automatically applied to their account. Again, the student is only eligible for what is not covered. So if on the aid offer, the estimated tuition and mandatory fees is $17,610. If with their grants and their scholarships, it already covers, it's equal to or greater than that, then they would not get Pledge for Success, right? Because that is already covered by other grants and scholarship programs. The Pledge for Success and Garden State Guarantee is considered last dollar, meaning it only covers what other programs don't cover, right? It's not applied on top of. So that would be the important piece of it. If you are looking at the aid offer, you meet the criteria, that's not the case, you're a little bit confused on where you stand on that, reach out to us. Our email, we'll put that in the chat for our direct email. Just reach out to us at FNAID with the students' information, and we can take a look at that and kind of specifically look at what's happening with that. But you don't need to do a separate application for any reason. When can work study be applied for? So work study workshops will be available in the next week or so. It's an online webinar, so they don't need to attend a specific in-person workshop. They complete a webinar online from our financial aid homepage. Once they complete the webinar, our office gets notified that the student completed the online webinar. And so we review the student for their eligibility, and then we notify them, hey, you're eligible for work study. Here's where you can apply for on-campus opportunities. These are the next steps. So they will be able to start completing that online webinar in the next week or so. The next question is, where can I apply for the Parent Plus loan? So the Parent Plus loan application would be applied for at studentaid.gov. So that is the same website that you would have logged into to do your portion of the FAFSA for the student, that very same website. So you as the parent would log in to studentaid.gov with your username and password, and then they will have a section for loans and apply for the Parent Plus loan. On the application, it's going to ask you to indicate what student you're applying for. It will have the student there, but just because the FAFSA will be linked to that specific student. On the application, you can either indicate an amount or indicate maximum. If you select the maximum, that assumes that it's up to $20,000 or up to the maximum amount the student can receive for the academic year based on their cost of attendance. If you know the specific amount you want to apply for, you can put an amount in there. Just note that the amount you're applying for will be for the year, so it will be split in half, right? So you're applying for the year, half of it will go to the fall, half will go to the spring. And also, if you're looking to put a specific amount, it would be advantageous to wait until you receive the bill. I say that because you won't know what the specific amount is right now, just because the tuition and fees, everything on the aid offer are estimated costs, right? So the tuition and fees is estimated based on, we think we'll have a tuition increase of 5%. The actual tuition and fees have not been released by the cabinet as yet, as well as the room and board will be based on the specific dorm and the specific meal plan that the student has if we're talking about a dorm student. So if you want to know the actual to the dollar, the correct amount, then you would wait until you're issued the bill. And then apply for the plus loan. You will have weeks in between when the bill is issued and when it's due. And the plus loan application gives you an answer immediately. So once you hit submit, it'll say approved or denied, and then we get the application in typically 24 to 48 business hours. So it's a very quick turnaround. So it's not something you need to apply for now and you're going to wait very long. So I would wait if you're looking for a specific amount until you get the bill and then start thinking about that part of it. To add to that, for private loans, they do take a bit longer to certify. So they could take up to 3 weeks if they need additional information, if they need to verify income, if you need a co-signer. So private loans do take a longer time to be approved. But you would still have weeks in between when the bill is issued to you and due. So you still have time for that as well. It just could take a little bit longer to get a definitive answer for a private loan if you're pursuing that.
So I'll take the next one. So you can rewatch the sessions on our YouTube channel. So all of the previous ones are already loaded on there. You could watch at your leisure. The June 17th one is probably going to be loaded that same night. And I will send an email on Thursday, the following day, to everyone to let you know that all the sessions have been loaded with links to the individual sessions and also to the link to the overall YouTube channel, because there are other helpful videos within the channel that you can watch, like how to waive the health insurance, since that's something that's going to be talked about on Wednesday. How to add an authorized user, how to add FERPA. So I encourage you to just take a browse on the YouTube channel just to see what the other helpful videos are on there. And then you're welcome, Kia. I'm glad that you found the information helpful and informative. So how soon can you receive the tuition bill? So bills for the fall semester are going to begin to be assessed the week of July 6th. So shortly after that, your student will receive an email to their William Patterson email to let them know that their bill is already assessed and viewable. This is going to be gone over on Wednesday, but if you are going to be paying your student's bill, I encourage you to have a conversation with your student so that they could add you as an authorized user. What happens is that when you become an authorized user, you're going to have access to the bill. So not only is your student going to get an email for the bill, you're going to get one as well. And then you'll be able to make payments, sign up for a payment plan, get the 1098-T, which is a tax form at the end of, the beginning of, or the end of January, so that you could file your taxes and things like that. So bills are coming soon, within the next 3 weeks. Can a freshman student who's living on campus have a car? Yes, they can. Like I said before, they just need to register the car with Campus Police. Phil says thank you, Stacy.
Are there any discounts for twins who are starting in the fall 26? There should be.
Yeah,
Um,
but unfortunately,
I would say though, that reach out to the designated admissions counselor, or the admissions team, just, to let them know that, they're getting a two for, well, I'm just kidding. They're getting two for one, but, that you're having two students come in, you're making a significant investment, in the students, but also in William Patterson, and whether, they have any additional funding opportunities. So I would still kind of make the effort. There aren't any designated programs for multiple students attending, or multiple students from the same family attending the university, or on an alumni basis in general, but it is something that I would inquire about. You never know.
I agree. Billing
Um,
is per semester. We
mhm.
do not bill for the whole year because, there may be some circumstance and the student may not be registered for the spring semester. So we only bill per semester.
Um,
So for the future orientations, I'm actually going to put them in the email that I sent on Friday, if that works. There's a follow-up from Phil.
Follow up to my earlier question, if a determination for the additional aid is not made until after the bill due date, do we need to pay the full amount of the bill and then get a refund? Yes. So if for any reason, let's say you submitted closer to the billing due date, or we just waiting on documents, whatever the case is, you can do a payment plan, which we have they'll discuss further on Wednesday, which will kind of stretch out the payment, so it gives you more time rather than paying everything up front. So you can split that bill into a monthly payment, so it gives us time to kind of review the information. Or if you do pay it all up front, then if the student is eligible for additional aid funds, it would just be refunded, issued as a refund, because the bill would already have been paid.
So if you cannot make it to honor orientation, how can you get information about honor orientation? So basically what happens is that the whole day is similar for everyone. And then honor has like an info session at the end of the day. If you email me your information, I can have Dean Andrews reach out to you so that they could fill you in on the information that you're going to be missing. And what type of payment arrangements are available besides the grants and loans? Well, maybe you should come to Wednesday session and find out. But yeah, no, in jokes aside, we're gonna go over additional payment arrangements on Wednesday, but just so that you know, there may be 529 plans that you already have invested for your student. There's a payment plan. An alternative payment plan as well. But our our teams from Student Enrollment Services are going to go over those options with us. Oh, so I'm a military veteran. Where can I apply for the GI Bill funds for my child? So you could reach out to veterans and also to registrar. It's been quite a long time that I haven't been versed.
I put it in the chat for the
Oh,
veterans,
okay. So
but
yeah,
you can reach out to the veterans office.
yeah, and then you'll be able to do the certificate,
Mhm.
and they'll be able to process that so that your student can get the GI Bill. And I think that is everything in the chat. If any of you has a question and you want to be brave enough and just come off mute enough and on video, you're more than welcome to use this time to do so.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said regarding the the military veteran fund. Where do I go again?
So Stacy put it in the chat, a link, and it gives you instructions on how to submit the documents.
And I'll put the direct contact person as well, so you can kind of copy that. I'm gonna reach out directly.
Oh, I don't see that link.
No?
See it?
No.
Let me put it here
Oh, I see it.
in the overall
Is it,
chat.
is it, mm, is it Sylvia Barrera?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Mhm.
that's the coordinator. Mhm.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
All right, so it doesn't seem as that there are any other questions. So if you're able, join us tomorrow for the trio chat. But it's gonna be recorded, so no worries. But definitely join us for the Wednesday session if you're able to, because although it's going to be recorded, being in person is better because you're able to ask your pressing questions. So if you're able to, please join us 6 p.m., just as today. Um, and I could send a reminder Wednesday morning for that session if in case anyone needs it, so that you could sign up for the session. But with that, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was a great conversation. I actually learned a few things that I didn't know because, again, I've been so out of the loop with financial aid and billing. It's been 3 years that we started this office, and if maybe some of you already know, but my background is in financial aid and billing and accounts. So I definitely learned new things. But again, thank you so much for joining us. If you do not join us for the next few sessions, I look forward to meeting you during orientation. I have an ice cream social, so I hope you come and share an ice cream with me. So
And I
until
think
then,
that
huh?
to all the parents who are prior degree recipients, and if you've borrowed student loans before or still have student loans that are going towards forgiveness, is to speak to your loan. Make sure you speak to your loan servicer. I'm just kind of dropping this in to make sure that if you're on the pathway to loan forgiveness and you apply for additional Parent Plus loans, how that will affect your loan forgiveness status. So that's just something to keep in mind, that borrowing additional loans may affect your loan forgiveness status, and or these additional loans may not qualify for loan forgiveness borrowed beginning fall 2026. So just be sure if you still have outstanding student loan balances that you're speaking to your servicer.
So yeah, so a lot of changes in the federal government, but Stacey is a pro and she's going to keep us on our toes with everything that is changing. And that's the beauty of having this office and me being able to communicate with you. So as these changes arise, we're gonna make sure that we post them in the family portal so that you know of them. All right, so thank you so much
Thank you,
and have
everyone.
a good night.
Good night.